far away. Yeah. And I'll keep that quite brief because in fact it covers much the same thing, and we're talking about the same area. And my submission is as a long-term South Shore resident, so I've lived there for just a bit over 20 years, and so it's a really important area. And having become more involved with the people who live there, we just find that building a relationship that allows us to be represented is probably the most critical thing as people recover from the quake and actually start looking forward. Now we're getting some roads worked out, people are starting to build. So from my point of view, that's really important. But I can just see the enormous workload, and having been involved in submissions for the coastal hazards, I just realise how time-consuming that has been and what an enormously steep learning curve. And so from that point of view, for my personal submission is that we, again, have to have the people that we can deal with, and that's really important. On a social level, looking at having Linwood added to our coastal Burwood group, is that although, again, part of it does make sense, we go right to into the middle of the city, and the social needs of perhaps the Linwood community is very, very different. And I'm really concerned that people will not get the level of representation that people who are more able and are fighting a specific battle will obviously be taking the bulk of the attention. So how do you then make it that those perhaps quieter communities that are going to miss out? And so I really feel for those communities, and we need to look at a way to make that fairer, if you like, for everybody. And so that is a really key point of my submission. Not necessarily that we shouldn't have Linwood. I mean, it does bring all the red zone into one area, and I can see that as being very good when it comes to the point where we actually start working on what happens to the red zone in the future. That in fact one area is probably the key one that is dealing with it, because they're the people that have to live with it. But I also feel that that combined community board and the councillors who represent us will have to be very strong in representing to the rest of the council and the rest of the city, because quite often I think people think, well, the earthquakes are gone for one side of the city, but for the other it hasn't. So we've got that divide, and it's, oh well, it's not our problem. Coastal hazards are not our problem because we're not by the beach. It doesn't really affect us. Okay, we have issues with the rivers, and they're not that great. There's a lot of silt, sediment, goodness knows what, a lot of work needs to be done. But whatever is done always ends up on our doorstep in South Shore. Literally. So if there's a leak of sewerage, or there's flow off from any industrial sites, from roads and so on, into the rivers, it ultimately ends up on our doorstep. And if we want South Shore, the beach, Brighton, as a recreation area, and it's a fantastic area, a fantastic wildlife area, and really it's a unique area, that we need to preserve that for the whole city, and that people throughout the city need to know that it's worthwhile and valuable. So that's those are really my points. That's all I'd like to say on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, actually, and I should have said this earlier, Lynda, too, and that's to acknowledge publicly, you know, the wonderful work that the South Shore Residents Association have done in helping to translate challenging issues so that they're accessible to a community under stress. So it is really appreciated, and it's we've got a hard road to hoe yet, but we'll get there, and you know, it's with people like yourselves and Residents Association like the one you represent that will help us get there. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.